Merry Meet Annie here. Welcome back to Tarot Together. The last video we talked about Waite-Smith decks, the variety of them. Even in a given, the Waite-Smith deck, there are variations on what may or may not have been the original. And then there's what happened to them in printings after that. The drawings may have been used with thinner or thicker lines and varying quality in the inking of those lines. The colors, the original colors, the debatable original colors may have been mimicked, but they could also have been recolored. And there's also the variation on the Waite-Smith deck, which is they were redrawn, maybe staying quite true to the original, maybe staying true to the color, or with a shifting in color. But all of those, it would say, were aligned to the original Waite-Smith deck. This video is about Waite-Smith clones. Clones are decks which are designed to mimic the Waite-Smith deck, to come very close to it, sharing in the same symbolism, often sharing in the same colorings, but not always. Variations on theme and the way the cards are created, in a way sometimes telling a slightly different story with characters that seem to be a little bit different. But the important thing is they are clones. And then a lot of us will have decks which are not Waite-Smith decks, which are not clones of the deck, which we'll explore further in a moment, but which we could say are inspired by the Waite-Smith deck. Those decks may not share a lot in imagery or symbolism or coloring. However, the meaning of the card is designed to be the same, but it's interpreted differently. The important thing about the non-clone Waite-Smith decks is first to have a personal reaction to them where the cards do represent what they were originally represented in the way you see them, and sometimes that's helped by the design of the deck and the little white booklet that the author of the deck has written to explain what they intended with each card. But what those cards still have in common with the Waite-Smith deck and its clones is the meanings of the cards. So you're working with the same energy. But for someone like me, and it's the reason why Waite-Smith is the deck that is often recommended to learn on, the imagery in those cards inspired by the Waite-Smith deck is designed to capture the meaning of the original cards, but without the symbols, the colors, the body attitudes, the facial expressions, the characters used that were part of that earlier tradition. So learning the Waite-Smith, understanding it, maybe even understanding its relationship to its clones, is very helpful. Because if the artwork in the Waite-Smith deck doesn't end up being what we relate to and want to work with personally, it still behooves us to know if the Fool exists in all of the decks. True tarot decks, of course it does, whether it's numbered or not, it's there. If we know what the meaning of that card is, we're better off knowing why the card has that meaning. Even if we end up working with a deck that has completely different characterization and coloring and drawing, personality and energy even, than a Waite-Smith or a Waite-Smith clone. If we're working tarot, we're connecting to the same energy, and it's good to know the history of that. So let's journey a little bit into the exploration of the Waite-Smith clones from my perspective. And of course I'll be very interested in hearing your perspective, either in the comments on Facebook or here, regarding the clones, your favorite ones, why they resonate with you, if a clone resonates with you. So let's begin with the Fool card from the Pamela Coleman Smith commemorative deck. This card demonstrates the things I look for in a Fool card. So they're the kinds of things I turn to the clones to see, do they have them? The sun's very important to me on the Fool card. It seems to disappear in a lot of clone versions. Its position, equally important to the fact that it is in the picture. The body language of the Fool. The staff that he carries along with the wallet, the bag at the end of it, the flower he's holding in his hands, the mountains in the background, the chasm before him, and his animal companion. Those are some of the symbols on the Waite-Smith deck for the Fool card. There's lots more, which we'll go into when we come to the Fool card. But these are the ones that are the most important for me to capture as a symbol that I look for in clone versions of the card. So let's compare this card to some of its clones. This is the Fool from the Druidcraft Tarot. It's a pretty good match, don't you think? When you look at the original on the left and the new comparison on the right. Body language is similar. The cliff is certainly still there. The staff and the wallet or the bag is still there, although interestingly in the opposite hands. And the flower is still there. Different flower, different hand, but it's still there. The animal companion is there at his side, most definitely, in the Druidcraft Tarot, and not behind him, as it's sometimes interpreted on the Waite-Smith deck. You get the sense of the card that he's high up in the air. And although it is difficult to see in this image, the sun is behind him in the clouds. This is the Fool from one of the many card decks entitled Crystal Tarot, but this is one of my favorite of the clones. It has everything I need to see in a clone. The attitude is definitely there. There's the staff and the wallet. The sun is behind, but obvious in this imagery. You get the feeling of height and mountains behind the Fool. The chasm, of course, is there. You could say that the animal companion is missing, but the lush vegetation surrounding this Fool equal to me the symbolism of the natural and gut instinct represented by the animal companion. The flower, well, you could say the flower is missing, except once again we could connect some of the aspects of vegetation surrounding this Fool to the concept of purity represented by the flower. The attitude in the face of this Fool matches that too, as does the fact that it would appear to be a young man or woman. Here's the Fool from the Tarot of the Hidden Realm. His attitude definitely feels right to me. He's holding a flower in his left hand. You can't see the chasm, but you have a feeling he's standing on a precipice just by his body language. There's a sense of the mountains behind him, and the coloration at the top of the card gives you a sense of the sun above him. He doesn't have a staff or a wallet, and he doesn't have an animal companion that has 4 legs, but the butterfly is a powerful symbol for instinct and natural gut behavior. And also, it appears in many of the tarot cards as a symbol of transformation. A pretty good clone card. This Fool is from the Legacy of the Divine Tarot. It's a really powerful clone. This Fool is not dancing at the edge of a chasm here on Earth, but he's dancing at the edge of time and space. Instead of the mountains behind him, the earth is behind him. The sun is still powerfully in exactly the right position for me on this card. He's carrying an interesting version of the staff and the wallet. And he does have his animal companion with him. This is an amazing clone of the Fool card. Here's an example of how creative some of these clone decks can be. This is the Fool from the Sun and Moon Tarot, a real favorite clone deck of mine. Very imaginative, but very powerful with the simplest of images. The sun's present, the chasm is present, although presented differently. No mountains behind, but water at the below, which is one of the interpretations of the Waite-Smith. Instead of a staff, there's the caduceus, and there is a tiger instead of a dog. This is the Fool from the Morgan Greer deck. This deck was intentionally created to be as close to the Waite-Smith as possible. There are some things missing, but all of the Morgan Greer cards are wonderful clone cards. And one last Fool clone, this time from the Tarot Lovers Tarot. I'm very fond of this deck because of its coloration. Not traditional, but so calming in its coloring and simple in its design that I go to that quiet place rather easily that I prefer to be in when working with the tarot. This Fool has the staff and the bag. He has his animal companion by his side. There are mountains in the background, and he's standing on rocks, which links him to the rocky ground the Waite-Smith Fool stands on at the end of the mountain, at the edge of the chasm. There's no sun behind him. The flower in his hand is missing, but this is a very good clone of the Waite-Smith Fool, and a deck I find easy and comfortable to work with. So there you go. There's my take on the power and the beauty of the clones to the Waite-Smith deck. I am moved by many clone decks. The artistry and the color and the way they manage to connect us to the intended meaning for the cards. I'm also moved by a lot of decks which are inspired by the Waite-Smith, but portrayed in a very different way. As long as when I look at them, I understand the deep connection to the original meaning of the card. I'm going to leave you with one example of that. This deck, unfortunately, is not a full deck, so it's not available at this point as a 78 card deck. I do hope that it will be someday. I think it's probably the only non-clone Waite-Smith that I would ever consider. And the reason is the imagery so powerfully connects me to the meaning of the card as I know it through my studies of the Waite-Smith deck, that I wanted to use it as an example to end this video. We've talked now about the Waite-Smith deck and its variations, its clones, and we've honored that there are decks inspired by it, which are very different images. That's what I'm going to leave you with. This is the image of the Fool from the Pen Tarot. Look at it. Thinking about all the images we've seen of the Fool, the powerful messages of wonder and curiosity, and fearlessness and transformation. Look at this card. It shares no symbolism, no colors, no art, or anything by intent which connects it directly to the Waite-Smith or its clones. It stands on its own, as so many of the decks inspired by the Waite-Smith do, capturing a powerful essence of the card, in this case the Fool, with completely different imagery. So I leave you with this, the Fool from the Pen Tarot. And as always, information linking you to our Facebook group follows at the end of this video and is in the comments section below. And as always, we've learned a lot from each other so far in this journey together. So your comments, your thoughts, your perspectives are very welcome. Mary Part.